obstacles, and is built on fundamental values of respect for people and continuous improvement. It's a principle that has helped to cement the organisation's position as South Africa's leading automotive company. With more than 200 dealerships across South Africa, TSAM also boasts an enviable 40 years of consecutive market leadership in the local auto retail. Toyota South Africa Motors. Where to start? Hey, I've got a funny story actually for the listeners. The first time I met you, you might not remember it at all, but I think it might have been one of your first, if not your very first professional road wins. Ronde van Limburg.
Yes.
And I was riding with Lotto Soudal, or it might have been Lotto Belisol back in those days. And anyway, we came into the final, long story short, and I opened the sprint up because we went up this little kicker, turn right, and I opened the sprint. I was 38 years of age or whatever, and I just put it in like the 54.11 and just tried to muscle it all the way to the line. And then, I finished second, and the guys in the team bus afterwards like, how'd you go? And I was like, oh yeah, no, not bad. I got second. Who won it? And I said, oh, I've got no idea. I said, some kid came past me in his small chain ring doing about 200 RPM while I was in, and then they go, oh, it was Van der Poel. And I'm like, so that was when I first met you. I was like, you came past me that fast, and you must have been in like 53.17 or something, and I was in like 54.11. It was just hilarious. And then I was like, oh well, now I know who Mathieu Van der Poel is. It was awesome.
But I didn't have the power back then, so I had to sprint that way.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. And then another really cool sprint, which just this year, was Flanders final. How impressive was that? That was like, so many people have asked me. I've told them that I'm interviewing you today and having a chat for Zwift, and they're all asking, like, what sort of power do you hit after 6 hours? Like, what sort of numbers do you peak out at it in a sprint like that?
My peak was, I think, around 1560 watts, so that's quite high. But yeah, we started a sprint really slow. It's different when you have already a sprint that is going really fast. So we started at a low speed as well, so you hit bigger numbers than when you have to put already some power between the last case.
You're in Belgium. How's the weather looking? Are you starting to hit Zwift a little bit more, and for the upcoming eSport World Championships?
I'm riding quite often on Zwift, but I always do that during winter because I like it. We do a lot more interval than during the summer, and I really like the way you can do it on Zwift. I do some low RPM intervals as well, and it's just really difficult to do them outside here.
Yeah, because so the low RPMs is the high torque efforts, and I guess typically if you're in Italy or Spain or something like that, you can just go find a big, nice long mountain to go and grind up. But maybe the efforts are a bit short where you are.
Problem here is you can only do them when there's a lot of wind. Then it's possible, but then you still have to ride pretty fast. So that's a problem.
So you've just had an off season. Are you starting back with the training now?
I've started, I think, 3 weeks ago now. After Ronde van Vlaanderen, I did the Pano Wednesday where I crashed, and then I took some time off, a bit longer than I was usually planned, but it was bad to start again. But now I'm training for I think 3 weeks now, so the shape is getting already a bit okay.
Yeah, to be starting to come around after 3 weeks of training now. So what age did you actually start cycling, or was it cyclocross was your first sort of introduction to the sport?
Yeah, I started doing cyclocross when I was 6 years old, competitive, so quite early.
Yeah, very early. That's awesome. Yeah, so when I was a kid, I started BMX racing. I came from a BMX track cycling background, and then sort of ventured into the roads, but I was about the same age. And so what your first race, when you lined up, did you win your first race, and that was kind of like kick things off? Here we go.
I don't think so, because normally I think the rule is you can start at racing at the age of 7. So I started 1 year earlier, and I was against a really good guy as well, who was a year older back then. So I don't know if I can really say, but I don't think I won my first race.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's always hard to remember. But so now you've won 3 cyclocross world titles. Elite. I mean, everything in the juniors, under 23 leading up, you've won. I mean, I wouldn't dare go into your Palmares. It's that long. We'll be reading your victories here for about 6 weeks. But your first elite world title, was that something special compared to everything else that you've done?
Yeah, in a way that it changed a lot for me. From that moment on, really things started to go really fast. Yeah, I got more popular in Belgium and around the world a little bit. So that was, I think, one of the first things that really changed my career. And then afterwards, of course, starting to race on the road and a mountain bike. But yeah, maybe I think that was the biggest victory, my first biggest victory that I've booked.
It was impressive to watch, actually. So, and give us a little bit of a rundown on how you were feeling that day and what the conditions were, just for the listeners who are interested in what cyclocross is all about, really, because I know in the southern hemisphere here where I live, Australia, New Zealand, we know about cyclocross, we watch it, but we're not sure of the actual details of what actually happens in a cyclocross race. It's like very, very popular in Europe, but you know, how long is it? What does it involve? Is it you know, weather conditions? What's it all about, mate?
It's basically 60 minutes of full gas racing. It doesn't really matter on which course it is, but it's always full gas. And then, of course, the weather conditions, they change a lot. Especially in Belgium, it can get pretty muddy. So it depends on the course as well, because a sandy course, it can rain on a sandy course, it won't get that muddy. But if you're just riding through a field where it has rained, then you have to get off the bike and run some sections. So it's basically pretty technical, and yeah, it's 1 hour of really hard racing.
So it's basically from the gun, flat stick. Is it all about positioning in the beginning too? Like you don't want to start near the back because, you know, what I've seen is narrow tracks and yeah, muddy, slippery. Positioning is really important. It
depends on the course as well a little bit. Some courses are more suitable to overtake some riders, but I think it's almost every race. It's really important to be at least in the first 5 positions when you have the first turn.
Yeah, it's incredible the power the cyclocross riders have. It's always noticed it when they came across and raced us on the road, Tour of Belgium, things like that. There'd be a cyclocross team that would come and race, and just that short explosive power is just incredible. And the bike handling skills was always incredible. Like in Belgium, you know, like there's always so much road furniture, and you'd always have the cyclocross rider be jumping up on the gutters or up on the roundabouts, you know, for positioning in the final sprints. It's incredible the bike handling skills that, you know, it just comes second nature to you guys, you know, because you're jumping over things all the time. But it was really impressive to race against the cyclocross guys. Let's talk about, you know, your next world title. It took you a couple of years to win the next one. What in between you had, was it a silver and a bronze?
Silver, bronze, and also 4th place, I think, or 5th place in Zolder. I don't really remember.
Okay, and how did that feel? You know, you've gone in as reigning world champion. Was there something behind the scenes we don't know about? Was there an injury, or were you just like beaten by a better guy on the day? How did that pan out?
In Zolder, I was stuck with my foot in Wout van Aert's wheel. That's also a popular image of cyclocross. But then
Yes.
I didn't feel pretty good that day, and I just let my head down a little bit. So that was not really good for me, but yeah, I just didn't have the legs to win there. Also in Valkenburg, I was beaten by 2 stronger guys that day. The problem is for me, when I go into a World Champion Cyclocross, there's only one place that counts for me, and I find it very difficult, not to be arrogant, but I find it very difficult to fight for a silver medal if you come to win the race. And then we had Pieles as well, and that was a day of bad luck for me with a lot of flat tires.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, that's fantastic to hear. I love that drive, you know, like a lot of people won't understand it, but it's it's the drive and the passion that elite athletes have to become world champion. You know, like I'm only going there for one reason. The only reason I'm going there is for that gold medal, and it's like victories in cycling too. No one remembers who got second or third. It's always, you know, even in a bunch sprint or whatever, you know, who won the bunch sprint. It could be a blanket that it covers the first 5 or 6 riders, but no one remembers who got second or third.
No, true.
So it's really interesting that you have that, you know, that desire and that sort of mindset, and I think that's what it takes to be, you know, such a champion, such a world champion that you are. So what drives you in the morning, every morning, to get out? And the same thing, is it just to better yourself as an athlete each day, or do you set micro goals along the way, or what gets you up in the morning to go training every day?
Well, the most important thing is that I just love training. I love cycling, getting better, suffering on training, and the only thing is, like now as well, if you start riding again after a break and you don't really feel well on the bike, then I don't really enjoy cycling. For me, cycling is only really nice when you have good legs and when you feel good on the bike. Then I can really enjoy it. And yeah, of course you set some goals, but just in general, I'm a very sporty guy. I think also when I stop my career one day, that I will always be a sportive guy as well after that. So it's really difficult for me to go a day without cycling now. So yeah, I think I just really love it, and then the rest is easier to become. If you enjoy training, it's easier to get better, of course.
Oh, that's great to hear that you love training. You know, like a lot of people lose focus of the process. You know, how do you actually get to become a world champion? It's following a training program. It's following guidelines, a specific plan. Trust the process, and you know you really do have to enjoy training, because some days it's just miserable. Some days out training.
Yeah, of course. And then Zwift comes in handy, of course, but I don't really mind. When I'm really motivated, I don't really mind anything, so I just go out there, rain or not. It doesn't really care, but in less important stages of preparing a race, then I'll easier just stay on the couch and have some rest. But yeah, for sure, there are also days for me that it's hard to get on the bike and do the training. I also have bad days on the bike. You just have to skip that day in your mind and just focus on the next one and hope that it will be better.
Yeah, that's the truth. And as long as you've done a consistent training block, a day off here and there doesn't do any harm. It actually can sometimes do more good than harm if you can, if you can rest well and be confident that the rest is doing you well.
Yeah, it's easy to overtrain, of course. Sometimes it's more difficult to say to yourself that you have to rest than just doing the training.
Absolutely. Now, you were speaking before about cyclocross being, basically full gas from the blocks. Have you noticed any similarities between cyclocross racing and Zwift racing, and how hard Zwift racing is?
Yeah, Zwift racing is even harder. In cyclocross, you can really use your technique to make some seconds and some gaps, and yeah, in Zwift it's really there's no moments of rest. It's just pushing all the way, and that makes it really hard.
Yeah, we were chatting. I chatted with Anna Vanderbregen last week, and we were laughing about how hard Zwift racing is, because when you're riding along in the peloton, and if you're in a real bunch peloton, it's quite easy to cruise along and take shelter and hide. But when you're in the peloton on Zwift, you still have to press quite a lot of power, don't you?
It's something special, and you also have to understand the game a little bit. So during the quarantine now, we did some races, we got some explanations on how to race, and then it really gets fun if you know how to handle the courses and stuff. Because the first race I did, I was dropped at the start already because I didn't start sprinting before the start was giving. So it's small things and details you have to know. Because at first I didn't really like it, because it was just, I didn't believe how the other guys were riding so fast while I was pushing a lot of watts. But then when you start to understand the game, then it gets really fun.
Yeah, it's so true, mate. Like you you literally, you see the countdown banner, and you almost have to start sprinting 3 seconds out so that you can actually. Yeah, it's crazy. And then it's called the gamification of the site. So also knowing what power up to use when, and how much difference the power up makes, and where to sit in the bunch as well. Like often on a road race, sitting at the back on a nice flat section is the easiest place in the planet to be. But on Zwift, if you sit on the back and lose the wheel by two meters, it is so hard to catch back up.
But the problem is that everyone knows that you have to be in the 10 or 50 first riders on Zwift, and everyone wants to be there, and then everyone is pushing a lot of watts to be there. So it's just basically full gas to be in the first 15 riders, and that makes it even harder.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, no, it's classic. It's going to be great. Everyone listening to this knowing that, like, it's not just them that feels Zwift racing. It's the top professionals of the world that find Zwift racing really difficult. So you can understand why, the races, when they did the virtual Tour de France and they did the Tour for All during the quarantine and the lockdown, it was... they were only 40 or 50 kilometer races, but it's far enough, and it's just like cyclocross. It's an hour, but it's enough.
Yeah, it's more than enough.
It's more than enough, exactly. And now you've ventured into mountain biking. Has it always been a plan of yours to venture across to mountain biking and as a motivation for Olympic desire, or what? How did that come about?
No, not really. It was actually just during cyclocross season that I started to think about maybe going to ride my mountain bike, because I didn't really have any experience before. And then the plan was to start mountain biking after a cyclocross season, but I don't really know exactly which year anymore. But I did the Cyprus Sunshine Cup there to gain some points. And I wanted to qualify for the Olympics in Rio in 2016. But then I had a knee injury, so I didn't reach the amount of points I needed to go there. And that was quite a disappointment, but then I just kept on mountain biking, because I wanted to prove not only to the world and to the team, but especially to myself, that I could be at the highest level as well in that sport. And it took me longer than I wanted, and I worked really hard for it, but it was such a nice feeling to finally win my first World Cup. Now already almost, I want to say last year, but with the COVID, it's almost 2 years ago already. So I didn't do any mountain bike races this year. So it was, that was really difficult. But let's hope that next year will be a bit normal again.
So, and just for the uneducated like myself, what are the major differences between mountain bike and cyclocross? Okay, obviously we know the bikes and the suspension, but tactically, technically, what sort of difference are we talking?
I think the most important difference is that there's a lot of climbing in mountain bike, and also if you see the power output of a cyclocross race in comparison to a mountain bike race, it's really a lot different, because in mountain biking you do 2, 3, maybe 4-minute climbs. You do them at a really high pace, but then you go down, you don't pedal, and then you go up immediately again, basically. And cyclocross it's really about accelerating maybe 15 or 30 seconds after every turn you have. So it's more of sprinting,
yes.
As where mountain biking is more of pace, over pacing basically, because it's really hard. The pace is really high on the climbs, but that's the big difference, because I thought it would be a bit more similar, but it took me some years to finally be at the top there.
Yeah, so that's really interesting actually. So when you think about that, if you just look at an SRM file or a training file, you'd be able to see, okay, here we go. You look at the course profile, and yeah, absolutely, for 2 or 3 minutes, and they're super steep climbs too, normally on the mountain bike. Whereas the punchiness and the really short accelerations in cyclocross, it's actually a different fuel system and energy system that you're using. So it's it's really interesting. But technically, you would have been quite comfortable technically on the mountain bike, or was that a different feeling also?
It was a difficult feeling as well, because I didn't really have any experience, and the mountain bike courses are getting more and more crazy at descents as well. So it took me a while to adapt, because the thing is, also in cyclocross I can really make a difference on technique. I think in cyclocross I'm amongst the best, and in mountain biking the first year I was just regular. I was okay in the downhills, but it was not that I could make a gap, and especially with Schurter, who was the man to beat there, I really had to push in the downhills to follow him. And when we started the next climb, he was recovered from the downhill, and I was suffering because I had to push in the downhill to follow. And there was also really something I really had to train in. I made the switch to ride my mountain bike quite often. I started 2 years ago because before I didn't ride enough, and then I just started to use the mountain bike a lot and also go to the mountains like Livigno and ride the mountain bike every day and get comfortable with the bike. And I think that was the last percent I needed to beat the top riders in mountain biking.
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, you sort of analysed and sort of identified your weaknesses as a mountain biker, went and trained them, and then came back and hammered them all. That's pretty impressive. So 2020 was Olympics was obviously a no-go. It looks like 2021's happening. Mm-hmm. You'll be hopefully on the start line in Tokyo.
Yes, that's the goal, but it's going to be a difficult combination because I'm doing the Tour de France also normally next year, so it's going to be a big puzzle, but I hope we can make it happen.
Mate, you are so busy at the moment with three disciplines. Actually, make that 4 disciplines with Zwift, because it's a great thing that Zwift's doing. You know, you do cyclocross, you do mountain biking, you do road cycling, and now esports is it's a different kind of cycling, but it's a discipline on its own. So, mate, I don't know where you find time to even sit down for a second. Okay, absolutely, your road training is going to help with the other 3, no question, with strength, endurance, and endurance base and things like that. What ambitions do you have on the road? Is that going to take a priority later on in your career, do you think, or is it just?
At the moment, not really, because I really like to combine the 3 disciplines. For some people, it seems a lot, like you say, and it seems impossible. But for me, it really helps me to be at ease and be able to switching bikes is just for me easier to do everything. Like if I don't really fancy riding on the road one day, I can take my cyclocross bike. If I don't want to do the cyclocross bike, I can go on the mountain bike, and that keeps it very, very good for me, and it keeps me in a good mental position as well. And for me, it's easy that I can switch bikes.
Thanks very much again for joining us, Ceylin. So where in the world are you right now? Actually, I asked all the podcast guests this.
I'm right now in Belgium.
Belgium.
Yes.
It's starting to get cold.
Yes, indeed. Well, for so far it was quite okay, like a soft autumn. But now it's starting to get, especially in the morning, it's starting to get really cold.
Right. Okay. So what are we starting to look to? Maybe riding a little bit more on Zwift now that the weather's changing, or do you use Zwift quite regularly through your whole training campaigns?
Well, no, I start to ride it more when it's like really bad weather. I ride on Zwift, but otherwise I like it more like outside and with a fresh air, and I prefer to do that. But now that it's getting colder and more rainy, it occurs that I get more often on the Zwift.
So what age did you start cycling or mountain biking or cyclocross? Or how does your sort of cycling introduction or progression occur? Give us a little rundown on that.
Well, I started when I was like 9 or 10 years old with road cycling. And then I think a year later, I also started to do cyclocross, but just to, get through the winter and do something and, keep it going. And yeah, it turned out that I'm doing cyclocross as a more like a profession than I do road cycling. But yeah, it started with also like a little push of my dad, because he was in his earlier days also a cyclist, and yeah, he said, well, don't you want to try to do, you know, some cycling? And that's how everything started.
Brilliant. So then you started off primarily as a road cyclist, is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
And then you know, you became very successful. Was it mountain biking first, or was it cyclocross first that you started getting all these results that I see in front of me?
Cyclocross. Well, I actually am only doing mountain bike for like 2 or 3 years now, so it's not so long.
Yeah, I can see that. And then obviously cyclocross in you got your first taste of World Championship glory is at under 23. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, in Valkenburg.
And then what year? It was this year that you won. It was actually February this year. It seems like just with COVID and the lockdown, it was this year that you won the world title, correct?
Yeah, that's true. It seems like years ago, but it was just in the beginning of this year, yeah.
It's crazy, yeah, just the lockdown and just because racing just got suspended, everything just got stopped. It was like, and then all of a sudden, everything got compressed into about 3 months of racing. So yeah, it was this year you won the world. How was that feeling? Like your first rainbow jersey in the elite ranks also. That must have just been amazing.
Well, I couldn't actually believe it in the beginning because, you know, it was so unreal. I mean, me as a still under 23 rider, and then, you know, just like, let's see if I can win something in the elite championships, and then actually winning the world title. It was like, yeah, something really insane, and it like took me a few days actually to, you know, sit down and realize what I just have done and what I had accomplished. And yeah, after it was really nice feeling, really good. Yeah.
So when you race or your GPs and things like that, do the under 23 race with the elite, or is it a separate race, so like your super prestige or things like that? Do you race with the elites at that time? So like what I'm asking is, did you know your competitors very well when you lined up to race them at the World Championships?
Yeah, because in cyclocross and also on the road, but in cyclocross we all race like in one category, so it's just all the juniors and under 23 and the lead women race in one race. So only in championships we race separately. So I knew that, you know, I had a chance and what I was capable of that day. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. It's very handy to know. Yeah, obviously, if you've raced them 100 times already, you know who the ones to watch are, and exactly if you're in good position to be able to take out the world title. But still, lining up at a world champs, you're never 100% certain, eh? It's you know, what can happen on the day at a world championships.
That's true. I think that if I would have raced like the whole season separately, that I wouldn't take that risk to eventually ride the world championships in the elite category. But as I said, because all the races are like together, you know how the level is and how your components are. So that was a lot more easier to say, well, I will ride elite and I will see what it will give.
So you also won the national championship